Hey everyone, and welcome back to the 1v1 series, a series where we pit two DBD killers against one another based on stats and our 6 categories: strength, agility, stealth, power, resistance, and intelligence, to decide which one would come out victorious. Strength is an assessment of the killer's physical strength, agility is an assessment of how quickly they can move and strike their weapon, stealth is how stealthy they are, power is how effective or strong their power is, resistance is their ability to resist incoming direct attacks, and intelligence is an assessment of how smart or resourceful they are. With these scores and my own reasoning for each of the numbers, we will decide who I think would likely win in a 1v1 fight. I'm going to try and be as objective as possible and be without any bias. If you didn't know, this series is becoming a bit of a tournament. Here's the table so far for the first elimination round. The goal of this series being a search for the strongest killer in the game. Today we are seeing who would win in a 1v1 fight, the Oni or the Executioner. Okay, so let's jump right into the strength category. I think we'll cover Pyramid Head first, as I think his strength is quite interesting. From the get-go, based on the weapon he wields, we can infer that he is quite physically strong, with the capability to lift his giant knife, as well as swing it high over his shoulder when doing his final judgment move. When he walks about, he does drag the great knife around and it scrapes across the floor. However, he is clearly doing this for the purposes of scaring the survivors, and not because the blade is too heavy. From other powers he has, such as his Rites of Judgment trails, he can pick this huge knife up and literally just carve up any surface that he drags the knife through. This again signals considerable strength, as many surfaces are concrete like the ones on the game, for example. Finally, when getting into strength, we also have to consider the main article of clothing that gives him his name too, the huge metal pyramid on his head that he is constantly carrying around. Now, this thing does seem to somewhat cripple him, as he seems weighed down by it. At the same time, it doesn't seem to broadly affect his movements, it just makes him slouch a bit. So I think from everything we can see, he has to be a 10 in regards to strength. The heavy pyramid, the great knife, his ability to cut into many surfaces, he gets a 10. Okay, now on to Oni. Just from looking at this guy, we can tell that he's an absolute unit. I'm going to go ahead and say that Oni gets a 10 too. It seems pretty cut and dry to me from reading through the lore. The Oni kills a ton of samurai, becoming so well known for doing so that he gains the name Oni in the first place. This guy wears big armor, carries multiple heavy-ish weapons, and can sprint at full speed when he enters his Blood Fury and does his Demon Dash. The physical impact of his Kanabo when sprinting is capable of insta-downing survivors, which certainly shows a huge amount of strength and the sheer force behind this. This is a tough one because both Oni and Pyramid Head are very strong, but they're both getting 10 here. Okay, so now on to agility. I think for Pyramid Head we can look at pretty similar things to see how agile he is. Again, a big part of the character and how he moves is his huge metal pyramid on his head, and although this does not affect his main movement speed, which is just the regular speed, he does have a slouched posture. Due to how cumbersome his great knife is also, we do have to take into account the speed at which he can swing his weapon, which of course the speed is actually the same for most killers, but when Pyramid Head swings he doesn't fully turn the blade around, he just swings it up from dragging, which I would argue is not a very effective way to be using it, especially in a 1v1. A lot of things about him are quite cumbersome and make it hard to turn or swing. However, the fact that he can still move and carry these things about gives him some credit, and therefore he gets a 6. Oni is in a similar position to Pyramid Head, where although he carries a lot of weight in his armor and multiple weapons, he does not seem particularly quick or agile. For example, when he swings his katana, he lunges forward and takes a big long swing. He doesn't really do any quick cutting motions, he just does a heavily extended swing. I believe he also does this with both of his hands. We can also see from moves such as Demon Dash that when the Oni goes into his rage mode, although he's very strong, he's not particularly agile, as his turning circle with Demon Dash is quite poor. You basically have to collide with objects when using this thing and slide off of them, which I would argue is hardly an agile maneuver. I think similar to Pyramid Head though, the fact that he can handle carrying all this weight and remain relatively agile gives him credit. So he's getting a 7. A bit higher, as I think the fact that Oni can sprint definitely shows his ability to exceed his heavy restrictions more so than Pyramid Head can. Stealth is an interesting one for Pyramid Head, as we can actually look at a few things, one of them being his perk Trail of Torment, which lets him go undetectable when destroying a generator, as well as the perk Deathbound, which also inflicts the Oblivious effect after 2 survivors heal. To contrast this, Pyramid Head clearly likes to not be completely unheard, as he is constantly dragging his blade around, which creates a screechy noise that you could definitely hear when he's in proximity. So yeah, Pyramid Head has this weird thing where he's both indicated to be stealthy, but also he does actions that prove otherwise. With all this said, I think he is primarily meant to be fairly stealthy as his role of Executioner, so I'm giving him a solid 8. His perks mainly help him out here. Oni also has quite questionable stealth, with only Nemesis out of his perks really giving us an indicator of how stealthy he has the potential to be when focused only on the obsession. One huge disadvantage Oni has, which granted Pyramid Head also has, is that he is very big and it's almost hard not to spot him off on the horizon. I mean, it's like a tank rolling towards you. However, when in Blood Fury, he can actually be quite stealthy just because he charges so quickly that the tear radius only comes up when it's too late. Whilst this isn't direct stealth, I do still want to give him points here. I think the fact that he's so big though, and that he screams when entering his power, and also that he doesn't have much direct stealth, he's only going to score a 6. A little above average, and again just because he gets slight stealth from his ability to charge people quickly. Pyramid Head I'm going to say for power outright gets a 10. Simply due to the fact that he probably has one of the most multifaceted and intricate powers in the game that allows him to be capable of quite a few different things. He can damage others at a range, whilst also using his basic attack. He can create trails in the ground to locate and also torment others. He can mori people and also cage people with use of his sword. So honestly, I think a straight 10 here. He doesn't just have basic powers, there's clearly a supernatural element to them, to a large degree at that. Okay, so Oni. One huge disadvantage the Oni gets is that he gets nothing until he starts collecting blood, meaning if he's in a 1v1 especially, he has to land multiple hits before he even gets to use his power, and as an extension to that, his much greater strength granted to him when entering Blood Fury. He truly relies on his ability to collect blood orbs in order to get anywhere other than his base kit. However, his base kit is still very good. He has armor, he has a katana, he's not in a bad spot in comparison to a lot of other killers, but he gets a 7. Now this is still a good score because when he enters his power, he becomes, well, very powerful, maybe more so than any other killer. However, he's restricted to his basic attack and movement speed until he gets enough to charge his Blood Fury. Okay, on to Resistance. Let's score them together for this one, as they both have a similar situation, which is basically that they both have a fair amount of armor and bodily protection, both Oni's armor and Pyramid Head's Pyramid Head. However, they also both have areas of exposed skin that could easily be struck by a blade and do considerable harm. There are many gaps in Oni's armor. Even the armor itself, I would argue, has the potential to be pierced by Pyramid Head's sword if he swung hard enough. In the same way, Pyramid Head aside his head only wears a kind of tunic, apron thing, which looks to just be cloth and not much else. So basically both get points here for resistance, but I think we're going to give Oni a 9 and Pyramid Head a 7, due to the fact that Oni has a bit more armor, and also he may be capable of reducing damage when in his Blood Fury, whereas Pyramid Head is only covered on his head, although quite considerably. Finally, we have Intelligence. I honestly don't think we have too much to go off for this one, so please, if I missed anything, do let me know. As in the lore available, they both seem to be very adept at their main hobby, which is killing, and also survival throughout all the different people they have gone against. I would definitely say there is more evidence for Oni on this, but again, there isn't much lore for Pyramid Head in the game, so Oni 8, Pyramid Head 7. Mainly they get these scores because being able to survive and take down so many people means you have to be both resourceful, strategic, and intelligent. So, this brings the final scores to 47 to Oni and 48 to Pyramid Head. So, Pyramid Head wins. This means he'll be moving on to the next round and fighting against last week's winner in the second heat. Alright, and now it is time for the description of the fight. The Oni steps into the hallway, to a place he has never been before. He can feel it though, something waiting for him. He begins to walk his way down, the lockets rattling and shaking as he passes. He grips the hilt of his sword with a firm hand, as a light scraping can be heard in the distance, like a blade cutting through the ground. He knew a sound too similar. He continued, not afraid of whatever was there waiting for him. As he grew closer to the end of the hallway, and the scratching grew louder, his target finally appeared, now standing in front of him, his blade as large as his body, and held firmly between two hands, blocking the end of the hall. No noise came from the thing, just a dull metallic groan. Oni stared at his inferior opponent, gripping his sword and tearing it out of where it had been hilted. Taking two hands and raising them to swing, he began to run towards it. The executioner remained motionless until the Oni had nearly reached his position. Pyramid Head's sword had been planted in the ground, ready all along. He swung it up, letting a ripple out that cut through the floor and also through the Oni, making him lose his footing, crashing into a row of lockers with a heavy thump. He didn't let it stop him. The Oni gripped his blade and swung immediately back, cutting the executioner's heel and consuming any blood. He felt revitalized immediately. The executioner took the opportunity while the Oni was still down and attempted a full swing, over the shoulder, right down onto the Oni's chest. The Oni moved fast though, He was ready to block the much larger blade. Despite this, the executioner's was far stronger. As the blade swung down, it collided with the katana, the sheer force smashing into it and making it shatter on impact. It was enough to block the blade from hitting the Oni himself though. The Oni got up, staring at the broken ancestral blade, the rage overcoming him. He didn't need the blood. He roared in fury, red fiery wisps bursting from the seams of his armor and the emptiness of his eyes. He pulled the kanabo from his back and rushed at the executioner with full force, bringing the kanabo down, smashing it over the huge pyramid that rested on its head. The kanabo shattered too, splintering about as it hit the executioner's pyramid head. He had clearly injured him though, as the executioner crippled to the floor. The impact was too much. The Oni kicked him over with a foot, still screaming with anger. He picked up the executioner's blade, ready to attempt the swing that the executioner had failed. It swung down, this time successfully cutting into the hulking piece of metal, creating a large cut in the executioner's pyramid. The Oni prepared another swing, and this time the executioner got up, slamming the tip of his pyramid right into the Oni's chest, the sharp tip cutting into him. He dropped the blade, and his rage quickly faded. The executioner grabbed the sword, swinging viciously. It came down, cutting the Oni's arm off clean. The Oni stood stunned, but he wasn't done yet. He was ready to fight till the end. He began to raise into the air, chains and metal wrapping around him until he couldn't move at all. The executioner had done this. Pyramid Head adjusted his blade sideways, before pushing it into the entrapped Oni. The Oni fell to the floor. His final judgment delivered. Okay, that's gonna do it. I do hope you enjoyed. Thanks, and goodbye.